I will now be playing the role of the second negative constructive. So, what I'm going to cover in my speech is all of the case arguments that my partner previously talked about. I'll go through Isaac's responses and I'll tell you why the case to go to Mars really just doesn't stand. Let's begin with the problem and the cause. The affirmative argument is that we have this directionless NASA, and if we only gave them a push and redirected some funding, that we could go to Mars. I made a couple arguments. I said that we should be focused on other issues, and I also argued that we have things like hunger and poverty, and that for every rocket we send up is one less hungry mouth that has been fed. Isaac made an argument about our survival. And what he's going to try to do in this debate is scare you, tell you that asteroids are coming and that the Earth is going to blow up and who knows what is coming down the chute. Our argument will be that, first of all, we need to focus on life on planet Earth. Why don't we try to fix the problems of poverty and global warming? Why don't we try to prevent causing our own destruction rather than trying to find some red planet off in the distance to be the solution to all of our problems here on Earth? Our second argument will be that we don't have to go to space in order to still save ourselves. We can develop all the same technology we need right here on Earth without ever spending a dime on space exploration technology. This is explained by Lind, a policy director at the New American Foundation in 2011. What about the argument that the human race needs to dwell somewhere other than Earth to avoid extinction? Well, it would be cheaper and easier to build and maintain underground bunkers than to use the same technology to do it at a vastly greater cost on the moon or other planets or in space stations. If humanity had technology to terraform the surface of Mars, it would have the power to make the ruined surface of Earth habitable again, making the colonization of Mars unnecessary. Therefore, rather than wasting money on Mars and trying to do this trip, why don't we instead try to make the Earth better and try to look at ways where if we do have some sort of terrible incident, we have bunkers that we can go into and survive. It makes a lot more sense than wasting billions of dollars going to Mars. When we look to the solution, we're going to understand even further why it doesn't make sense to go to Mars. Now, Isaac reads you some evidence from MSNBC that says it's feasible to go to Mars. And I asked him in cross-examination, what experiment? How do we know that we have the technology to go to Mars? What tests have we done? He couldn't really name any. He just insisted that we have the technology to go to Mars. But that's not true. That is, if you ask the head of NASA. As we see quoted in Florida Today, February 25th, 2005. He said he agreed that Mars ought to be the space program's ultimate destination, but said he couldn't set a date because NASA needs to complete research funded in the new budget. Bolden said, Bolden, who is the head of NASA, we can't get there because we don't have the technology. So the status quo, the present system doesn't have the technology to go to Mars, and whatever reports Isaac's giving you, according to the head of NASA, they're not true. The second thing is that Isaac didn't really respond to the evidence I read from the San Jose Mercury News. It talked about the biodome experiment. It's not just some goofy Pauly Shore movie, it's also something that really happened. We put people in a biodome, about 8 of them, and we said, could you survive? They put the folks in a desert, and they tried to figure out if they could survive in kind of a Mars-like environment, but here on Earth. What they found, according to the evidence I read, was that there were a lot of problems. They couldn't get the terraforming accomplished, and the evidence, parts of the evidence I didn't read, go on to say that eventually the crew gave up and walked out of the biodome, which was in Arizona, not Mars. The article goes on to say the radiation could be deadly on Mars, far worse than levels experienced by space shuttle astronauts. And Mars is more remote than the space station or even the moon. Just sending a radio signal to Mars takes 20 minutes. It would be next to impossible to rescue someone. Proponents of a Mars mission admit that astronauts may be lost along the way. So to me, it sounds like a mission to Mars is more like a suicide mission for whatever astronauts we were to send up there right now. We don't have the technology, and when we tried to do tests on Earth, they failed. Our argument is that we should continue trying to make Earth better, that we should focus on developing technology here on Earth, and that we should ignore the red planet at this current time. Now let's go ahead and look to the survival advantage. Once again, Isaac talks about how if we don't go to Mars, we're going to we're all going to die. It's basically his scare tactic argument. But what he doesn't do is he doesn't get to the argument we make, which is that space exploration will cause environmental problems and war. The evidence that I began to read, I'm now going to finish. That evidence said, we are now poised to take the bad seed of greed, environmental exploitation, and war into space. Having shown such enormous disregard for our own planet Earth, the so-called visionaries and explorers are now ready to rape and pillage the heavens. Thank you.
So because there are some bad people in the world, we shouldn't explore Mars?
No, because we are currently destroying our own planet, we shouldn't just say, well, let's give up and find a new home.
I don't quite think that's a fair characterization of the affirmative. Where does the affirmative say, let's give up on all current research?
Our argument is that there's a trade-off.
Do you read any evidence that says that there's a trade-off?
Yeah.
Which evidence?
Dwight D. Eisenhower. He said, for every rocket that we send up into space is a hunger need unfilled, is a child without clothes that does not have them. There's only so much money we have.
So if we stop spending money on NASA, we would solve hunger.
That's not my argument.
That is your argument.
My argument is that there's a trade-off.
There's other things I need to get to. Now, you make a big to-do about this technology, but we did make it to the moon in the 1960s, correct?
Yes.
From when Kennedy issued the challenge, how long did it take us to get to the moon? 8 years or so?
I don't know, but the moon is in no way...
Right. Now, does the affirmative go to Mars tomorrow? Or does it say when the technology is ready?
We have actually no idea when you would send people to Mars.
Right, when the technology is ready is what the affirmative case says. So all these technology questions could be resolved, right?
No, I don't think all these technology questions...
What exact technology barrier have you cited that says we can't go to Mars?
We talked about that the trip would be a suicide mission. We don't know how to
we responded to that.
We don't know how to... Yeah, you said, yeah, that's fine, we'll make it a suicide.
No, I said they would have more connection with NASA than what the people in the biodome did. That was our...
The MSNBC evidence you referenced talks about how it has to be a one-way trip to Mars, which means the affirmative case, if it's what that MSNBC evidence indicates it is basically a suicide mission for whoever's going.
Right. Well, the first mission maybe, but not the second or third.
Right, assuming that they work. And our argument is that they're not going to work, and we would be better off. You don't
ever give a specific technological barrier.
We also talk about how it takes 20 minutes for a radio signal. There's evidence about the radiation.
We've sent things to Mars before. How is that any different?
Yeah, it takes 20 minutes. It just makes, bad time.